For those of you that love talking about animals, from Sci News, Sarmientosaurus musacchioi, new Titanosaur species discovered in Argentina. A remarkable new species of Titanosaur and sauropod dinosaur being named Sarmientosaurus musacchioi has been discovered by a team of paleontologists led by Dr. Ruben Martinez at the National University of the Patagonia San Juan Bosco. So let's take a deeper look. Interesting. When I first saw this, I was guessing it might be a species of Camarasaur, but it's mentioned that it's actually a Titanosaur. So when looking at a Camarasaur, Camarasaurs tend to have a very circular sort of shaped skull. And this animal or this species of Titanosaur has a very elongated sort of skull structure. So somewhat more similar to the Diplodocids, but, when you look at its teeth, it's somewhere in the middle of like a diplodocid and a Camarasaur. Camarasaurs tend to have a bit more of a roundish sort of a tooth structure. Um, they existed back in the Jurassic, so this is quite interesting. And also, judging by the picture, it seems to be a very short species of Titanosaur. There were small species of Titanosaurs later in the Cretaceous. There were certain individuals that didn't exceed much more than 12 to 1,700 pounds, or a little over 600 to 800 kilograms. So let's head back to the article. Sarmientosaurus musacchioi roamed what is now Argentina approximately 95 million years ago in the Upper Cretaceous epoch. Well, this is interesting considering this is right after the largest species of Titanosaurs had ever evolved just went extinct, such as Argentinosaurus and Patagotitan, which also lived in Argentina around 98 million years ago. An exceptionally well preserved skull and neck fossil of this new dinosaur was unearthed in the Bajo Barril Formation of southern Chubut province, central Patagonia. I think when people tend to think of the very beginning of the early Cretaceous, there's all of a sudden like this sad sort of atmosphere because around 96, 95 million years ago, the largest species of titanosaurs all of a sudden just went extinct, as well as the some of the largest species of carnivores to ever exist, such as Giganotosaurus and Mapusaurus. And so there's just this empty niche of herbivores, especially the extremely large species, but the truth is, you did have different species already evolving by the time they went extinct, such as apparently this Sarmientosaurus. According to the scientists, Sarmientosaurus musacchioi is the first titanosaurian sauropod from southern South America for which a virtually complete adult skull has been discovered. Finally! It's so good to hear that we have a late Cretaceous, especially early late Cretaceous, species of sauropod dinosaur, and specifically a titanosaur with a skull. Most species of titanosaur are not discovered with skulls. So this is extraordinarily good to hear. Using CT scans, they found that the Sarmientosaurus brain was small relative to its enormous body, typical of sauropod dinosaurs. Yeah, I was going to say, if you are a species of sauropod, your brain is bigger than a golf ball. You are a genius. So let's take a look at another species of Mesozoic animal. So this individual lived much later in the Cretaceous compared to the Sarmientosaurus. This is Sechania. And Sechania was a species of ankylosaur that existed in Mongolia around 75 million years ago. So it was closely related to the North American Euoplocephalus at the time, which technically existed right at the exact same point over in Alberta, Canada. But Sechania was probably either the same size or slightly larger. So pushing a length of over 25 feet, we're pushing 8 meters, and probably weighing somewhere around 3 to 4 tons. So this was definitely a very armored tank at the time. But also, unlike different species of Ankylosauridae and not the nodosaurs, it has extremely um, yeah, specifically referring to Ankylosauridae. It has very spike-like osteoderms running along the edge of its tail. Most of the ankylosaurs would have had armor along the end of their tail, but not in a spike-like structure. This is more of a nodosaur sort of a trait, so something that you would see in different species like Gastonia, Edmontonia. That was back in the early Cretaceous, over 130 million years ago. Um, but this individual was spiked all along the sides from the tip of its skull to right up the end of its tail. Even its club tail isn't exactly very circular or just wide like with what you see in other species of not ceratopsian, ankylosaur at the time, or even slightly later into the Cretaceous. So this animal did have to be careful with different species of tyrannosaur in the lineage, not the lineage, the region that it inhabited within Mongolia during the late Cretaceous. It did end up going extinct around the same time that the larger Tarbosaurus tyrannosaur existed. So this is referring to a species of tyrannosaur that could push over 35 feet in length or over 11 meters and probably weighs 6 to 7 tons. And this was far before T Rex as well. But you also had different species of tyrannosaur over in Alberta at this point, such as Albertosaurus and Daspletosaurus. This is possibly supposed to replicate a Tarbosaurus individual or a smaller species of Tyrannosaur. Probably wasn't Electrosaurus because Electrosaurus had already gone extinct far beforehand, around 90 million years ago. So it couldn't have been him. Possibly a younger Tarbosaur. So let's head back to the article. See. However, they also found evidence of greater sensory capabilities than most other sauropods. Interesting. I mean, I would expect this. There might have been not a lot of intelligence involved, and you wouldn't need very much if really all you're doing is simply feeding on different species of plants, though you still have to be picky to an extent, and there's a lot of intelligence that goes with that. Um, and migrating, laying your eggs, a few other things, watching out for predators, but also, you're what's probably going on here with many species of herbivorous dinosaurs is that the brain size is being focused in different areas of brain, such as hearing, possibly smell, maybe less so vision. That tends to be heightened in different species of carnivores, but there are certain herbivores that have very good vision as well. Sarmientosaurus musacchioi possesses a number of distinctive features that have not been observed in other sauropods. So this is about to get interesting. The cranial endocast presents among the most complete information about the brain and sensory systems for any sauropod, let alone titanosaurs, and thus will be important for the developing picture of neural evolution in sauropoda. Hmm. They suggest that this titanosaur had large eyeballs and good vision. Okay, I'm going to correct myself. Apparently, certain sauropods, like this individual, had very good vision. Wow, this was unexpected to hear. I'd understand maybe certain species of later hadrosaurs or different species of iguanodontid dinosaur, such as iguanodon or edmontosaurus. Um, Definitely not the stegosaurs. But this was actually quite shocking. And its inner ear may have a better tune for hearing low frequency airborne sounds compared to other titanosaurs. Whoa, okay, so this individual has definitely put more, um, I guess, just passion into creating a much better hearing and um, visual system. So this is quite unique. I mean, titanosaurs, sauropods in general just tend to be made fun of for all of their sensory capabilities. Maybe slightly less so for hearing, but this is quite shocking. So let's take a look at another creature from the Mesozoic. And this is Yanghunosaurus, which existed in China around 160 million years ago during the mid Jurassic. China is not usually talked about when it comes to different species of stegosaurus, especially during the late Jurassic period. Many more species of dinosaurs tend to come out of China from the early Cretaceous and to somewhat an extent the late Cretaceous. Now, this isn't the only species of Chinese stegosaur to be found in China. You also have animals such as Tuyungasaurus, I think Shingosaurus. But this individual reached a length of somewhere around 20 feet or pushing over 6 meters and probably weighed somewhere around 2 tons. So for the time, it was probably having to watch out for different species of carnosaur in the region. Animals such as the tyrannosaurs have also evolved in China at this point, migrating from Western Asia and Europe, but they're likely not a big threat to the stegosaurs at this point, and they were fairly small. So 160 million years ago, the tyrannosaurs were not much more than 500 pounds or pushing a little over 230 kilograms. So, Stegosaur was probably watching out for different species of um, carnosaur in the region. So, let's head back to the article. Um, Also, the stegosaurs didn't have a very small brain either. Many of them was about the size of a walnut, and that's actually quite large, especially when you're looking at stegosaurs. Also, despite the um, plate appendage on this specific stegosaur, it is quite closely related to Stegosaurus itself, as well as a genus of stegosaur called the Werhersaurus. So let's see. Moreover, the balance organ of the inner ear indicates that this dinosaur may have habitually held its head with the snout facing downward, possibly to feed primarily on low growing plants. This has been a big debate when it comes to most species of sauropod dinosaurs. It's been a bit more agreed upon when it comes to talking about different species of brachiosaurs, that they held their heads firmly up in the air. Also, when you look at different species of animals, fish, or not fish, different species of reptiles, amphibians, mammals, they birds, they hold their neck or they have a somewhat vertical neck posture, which means that it's being tilted upwards, much like a giraffe, even a person. So it's also been a bit more agreed upon with other lineages of sauropod that they would have had upright vertical necks, whereas the horizontal or lower sort of neck structure has been um, really up for debate in recent times. So it's very possible that this animal might have had a sort of horizontal neck structure, but I think it still most likely had the ability to rear up on its hind legs and reach higher up in the trees when food was more scarce during certain parts of the dry season. So let's keep going. Discoveries like Sarmientosaurus musacchioi happen once in a lifetime. That's why we studied the fossils so thoroughly to learn as much about this animal as we could. Yeah, you got a lot in that, short amount of time, though we, don't know how much longer beforehand. You do have instances with different species of dinosaurs where they were found decades prior, and they simply hadn't been named. They were kind of thrown into a wastebasket, so, this individual might have simply been thrown to, Titanosauridae, but nothing else was added to it. And then probably a few years prior to this article being written, a lot of um, uh, analysis was done on this specific individual. So let's take a look at another species of Mesozoic animal. And this is a very unique species of crocodilomorph. This is actually a meadowsuchian. And the meadowsuchians first evolved during the early Jurassic around 197 million years ago. So before animals such as Dilophosaurus, Cryolophosaurus, but also after different species of crocodilomorph, not, well, technically, yes, or more Rausuchians such as Postosuchus, which ended up going extinct around 217 million years ago during the late Triassic. However, this is much wait, yeah, Majuchangasuchus, which existed in the late Cretaceous around 70 million years ago in Madagascar. So, obviously his name was King Julian. And this individual was probably somewhere around 11 feet in length. They're pushing around 3.3 meters and probably weighing somewhere around 5 to 700 pounds or somewhere between 300 and 400 kilograms. So, this individual, looking at the robustness of its skull structure, I mean, as you can see, this is not a lightly built species of crocodilomorph. Um, it was probably able to crush bone and feeding on any species of dinosaur within the region that was at least its size, if not slightly larger. There were different species of crocodilomorph back in the late Triassic period, over 210 million years ago, that would have fed on the largest species of sauropodomorph at the time. I believe it was a certain species over in South America, possibly Brazil or Argentina, that could have reached over 30 feet in length or 9 meters and probably weighs somewhere around 1 to 2 tons. It was a behemoth for the time and practically ate any dinosaur or other reptile for the most part in the region. This individual was definitely capable of taking on, I would guess, animals weighing at least 1,100 pounds or pushing over 550 kilograms. Oh, yeah. So this individual, so it also belongs to the um, Majunga Chisukidae lineage of the Medosuchian crocodilomorphs. But the Machengosuchidae lineage first evolved around 95 million years ago and then would mysteriously go extinct at the end of the Cretaceous around 66 million years ago and not survive with the other land based crocodilomorphs or terrestrial crocodilomorphs who would make it into the next era, being the Cenozoic era, the era of mammals. So they had an okay reign for a member of the or lineage of the Medosuchians. So they were quite distantly related to the Rausuchian lineage of crocodilomorphs that consisted of animals such as Postosuchus and even Poposaurus, but they already went extinct back in the Triassic, so before even the Medosuchians would have evolved. Anyway, let me know what your favorite species of sauropod or even crocodilomorph is in the comments. And from prehistoric to present, my name is Ethan. This is Creature Guide Live Daily News. Remember to like, comment, subscribe if you love talking about animals, and share this show with everyone you know because nothing is better than all animals all the time.